The battlefield was chaos incarnate. Alien Marines, a mixed coalition of intergalactic species, fought desperately to hold their ground against an enemy that didn't just know how to fight. They knew how to win. Bombs exploded in the distance, the sound of gunfire echoing across the barren landscape, shrouded in the smoke of craters and scorched earth. Their enemy was a force unlike any the aliens had ever faced, ruthless, efficient, and relentless. The human contingent had just arrived. Among them was Captain Reese, their leader. He was human, lean, and unassuming. To the aliens, the idea of sending mere humans to reinforce their lines seemed almost absurd. These were Deathworlders. They knew, dangerous, but also unpredictable. No one had seen them in action before, and the alien Marines weren't sure what to expect. Despite their reputation for resilience, the humans were small and physically weaker than the species they were about to fight alongside. For a moment, the aliens doubted. Their eyes followed Reese as he strode through the chaos, a calm presence in the storm. He wasn't like them. His armor wasn't as heavy, his movements more deliberate. But there was something in his eyes, a sharpness, a calculating focus. He surveyed the battlefield quickly, absorbing the flow of the fight, recognizing opportunities and threats with eerie precision. The order came. It was a simple one. Move. And with that, Reese's human unit sprang into action, moving with an almost unnatural synchronicity, covering each other, filling gaps, advancing as though they had trained together for years. The aliens watched in awe. These humans didn't hesitate. They fought like they knew the battlefield, like they knew exactly what needed to be done. The alien Marines, disorganized in the face of the enemy's brutal assault, began to fall into step with the humans. Slowly at first, then with more confidence. Reese wasn't just giving orders. He was fighting right alongside his men. His rifle spit controlled bursts of fire with deadly accuracy, and he seemed to always be in the right place at the right time. His focus was singular: to win, to survive, to protect his people. It didn't take long for the aliens to realize that Reese wasn't just another soldier. He was a leader, and he was a warrior. The battlefield, for the first time in hours, began to shift. The line stabilized. The enemy still pressed hard, but Reese's presence, his strategy, brought a focused clarity that had been missing before. But it was far from over. The enemy responded with overwhelming force, sending in shock troops and heavy artillery. The air around the stronghold seemed to vibrate with the sheer intensity of the assault. Explosions rained down, and the ground beneath their feet shook with the force of incoming artillery. But Reese, undeterred, adjusted. His orders cut through the noise like a sharp blade. Keep moving. Don't let them pin you down. It wasn't a suggestion. It was an instruction, a directive. Reese understood the nature of this kind of warfare. They couldn't afford to get bogged down in the chaos. Movement was key, and as the battle raged on, Reese was everywhere. The alien Marines, initially skeptical of the humans, started to follow his lead, moving with a sense of purpose that had been absent before. They fought as one, alien and human alike, forming a bond that transcended species. Reese wasn't just leading his people. He was leading all of them, humans and aliens, united under a single banner. There was no more room for hesitation. The enemy, sensing the shift, escalated their assault, pressing harder on the defensive line. But Reese remained calm, steady in his resolve. The aliens around him were beginning to believe that they could win, believe that they could turn the tide. But Reese wasn't done yet. He knew the hardest part was still to come. The enemy would push harder. The battle would get worse before it got better. But Reese was already planning the next move, already thinking 5 steps ahead. For the first time since the battle began, there was hope on the battlefield. Not because the fight was over, not even close, but because they had a leader who knew how to fight, how to lead, and most importantly, how to win. The human Marines didn't just show up to fight. They showed up to change the course of the war. And Reese? He was the one who would ensure they succeeded. The battle intensified, and the stakes couldn't have been higher. Reese's human unit had been pushing forward with relentless efficiency. But now, the true cost of war began to take its toll. The enemy unleashed their full fury. Artillery shells screamed through the air, ripping apart everything in their path. The ground was a battleground of fire and fury, and Reese's troops were feeling the weight of the assault. Amidst this chaos, an ambush was sprung, an enemy tactic so precise, it was like they had been waiting for this moment. Hidden units burst from the earth, advanced weapons flashing like deadly lightning. The defensive line shattered as enemy fire rained down, cutting through the alien Marines and the humans alike. Panic set in. The overwhelming force of the enemy's sudden strike left the Allied forces on the verge of collapse. But Reese didn't flinch. His mind worked quickly, calculating, assessing, forming a strategy in real time. As his soldiers scrambled to regroup, Reese took immediate action. He rallied a small group of Marines, both human and alien, and led them in a counterattack, one that would serve as a distraction. They would create chaos in the enemy's ranks, draw their fire, buy time for the others to regroup. The sound of gunfire intensified. Explosions shook the ground, and in the midst of it all, Reese fought. He was a whirlwind of motion, his movements controlled and deliberate, despite the impossible odds. His rifle fired in sharp bursts, each round finding its target with terrifying precision. He wasn't just leading from the back, barking orders. He was in the thick of it, his every step a statement of resolve. His resolve. Then came the moment that seemed impossible. The blast tore through the air with a deafening roar. Reese was thrown backward by the shock wave. His body slammed to the ground. The force of the explosion was enough to send debris flying in all directions, and the smoke and dust created a hazy, suffocating shroud. When the dust settled, the sight was horrific. Reese lay motionless, his left arm severed just below the shoulder. The blood flowed rapidly, pooling around him in a widening puddle. To the alien Marines who had seen countless battles and faced death on a regular basis, the sight was devastating. Losing a limb in battle was more than a death sentence. It was the end of the fight. A soldier could survive an injury, but not one like this. Not one this severe. But Reese didn't stay down. Against every expectation, against the instincts of those around him, he pushed himself up. His face was pale from blood loss, his eyes glazed with pain. But there was something more. A fire, a quiet, burning determination that could not be extinguished. Ignoring the gasps of disbelief from his men, he reached for a fallen soldier's rifle and used it as a makeshift crutch, staggering to his feet. "We're not done yet," he said, his voice steady despite the agony. He didn't shout. He didn't demand attention. He simply stated the truth. They had more fight to give, and he would be the one to lead them. The alien Marines froze. They had never seen anything like this. To them, losing a limb meant death. It meant surrender. It meant the fight was over. But Reese defied their understanding of what was possible. He stood on his remaining arm, his blood dripping onto the dirt, and kept moving. For a moment they hesitated. Doubt crept in. How could anyone fight like this? How could anyone endure such pain and keep going? But then Reese spoke again, his eyes burning with intensity, his voice firm and unwavering. "If I can stand, so can you." The words hit the Marines like a jolt of electricity. They saw in Reese something they didn't understand, something they didn't think was possible. Slowly, reluctantly at first, they began to rally. One by one, the alien Marines drew strength from Reese's unyielding presence. His will was contagious, and the fear that had threatened to swallow them began to fade. They followed him, moving forward, returning to the fight with a renewed sense of purpose. Reese wasn't just a leader. He was an embodiment of the indomitable spirit that had made Deathworlders legendary. He wasn't waiting for reinforcements. He wasn't hoping for a miracle. He was making it happen through sheer force of will. Every step forward, every order barked in the heat of battle, Every decision made with unshakable confidence was a testament to the strength of the human spirit. The battle didn't stop. The enemy didn't relent. But Reese did not give them the victory. He didn't give anyone the chance to claim that they had won, not as long as he was still breathing. As the alien Marines continued to follow his lead, something remarkable happened. The shift in momentum wasn't just tactical. It was psychological. The Marines had seen the impossible. They had seen one man, one human, defy death itself and keep moving forward. They no longer fought for survival. They fought because Reese had shown them that they could. And as the tide of the battle began to turn, Reese, battered and bloodied, led the charge. His injury, his pain, his exhaustion, they didn't matter. What mattered was the mission. What mattered was finishing what they had started. The fight wasn't over. Not by a long shot. But Reese had shown them how to endure, how to keep going, even when it seemed like there was no hope left. And in that moment, as the alien Marines followed him into the fray, they understood. They weren't just fighting for themselves anymore. They were fighting for something greater. They were fighting for Reese. The assault on the stronghold was now in full swing. The combined forces of humans and alien Marines, their morale bolstered by Reese's unyielding will, pushed forward with relentless determination. The stronghold itself was a fortress, a well-defended maze of walls, automated turrets, and fortified positions. The enemy held these positions fiercely, knowing that the loss of their stronghold would be a devastating blow. Yet they underestimated one thing: Reese's resolve and the power of his example. Reese, despite the obvious toll the battle had taken on his body, led the charge with a single-minded focus. Every step was an act of defiance, a refusal to succumb to the pain, to the bleeding, to the exhaustion. His movements were slower now, each breath a struggle, but the fire in his eyes never dulled. He had made it this far, and nothing would stop him from seeing this through. The Marines followed him, their faith in him now unwavering. Their skepticism, their doubts, had been replaced with something stronger: respect. They watched him move, unbroken, through the chaos. His every command was executed with precision. Every shot he took from his rifle dead on. He was the embodiment of human resilience. Where others would have crumpled, Reese stood firm. They reached the outer perimeter of the stronghold's defenses. Automated turrets scanned the battlefield, their sensors detecting every movement. Energy shields hummed with a low, threatening pulse. The enemy's forces were dug in, their defensive positions reinforced with heavy armor and well-placed barricades. The challenge seemed insurmountable. Yet Reese wasn't deterred. He knew that with the element of surprise and a bold strike, they could break through. Gathering his remaining strength, Reese outlined the plan. It was risky, dangerous even, but it was the only chance they had. They would hit the stronghold fast, strike hard, and never give the enemy a chance to regroup. Reese would be the distraction, drawing the fire of the turrets and the enemy forces, allowing the rest of the team to disable the shields and breach the defenses. The alien Marines looked at him with apprehension. Some muttered under their breath, questioning the wisdom of such an audacious assault. But Reese's unwavering confidence was infectious. He didn't give them room for doubt. "I've made it this far," he said with cold certainty. "We're going through. You'll follow me. Now move." The assault began with a deafening roar. Reese was at the forefront, leading the charge with reckless abandon, moving faster than most would have thought possible in his condition. His movements were a strange blend of calculated precision and sheer audacity. He drew the enemy's fire, using his environment to his advantage, weaving in and out of cover with uncanny speed and accuracy. The Marines followed, moving quickly, executing their flanking maneuver as planned. With the turrets disabled, the enemy's defensive line was starting to crumble. But Reese was paying the price. Every step forward was an effort, his body racked with pain. He was slower now, staggering, his breath coming in short, ragged gasps. But he refused to stop. He had come too far. The mission wasn't over yet. His rifle fired in controlled bursts, cutting down enemies with deadly precision. But with every shot, his strength was draining. His left side was a mess of shredded armor and exposed muscle. He had fashioned a makeshift sling to stabilize what remained of his arm, but it did little to ease the strain. Each movement was a battle. Yet he moved forward. The Marines behind him, seeing their captain's relentless will, pushed harder, moved faster, and struck with greater precision. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for Reese, fighting to honor the spirit he had shown them. But just as the stronghold's defenses began to break, disaster struck once more. Reese took another hit. This time, it was a grazing blow to his side, the impact sending him crashing to the ground with a grunt of pain. His rifle slipped from his hand, and for a moment, the Marines feared the worst. But then, just as before, Reese's hand shot out and grabbed his weapon. His body trembled, but his spirit never faltered. "Get up," he rasped, his voice barely above a whisper, but filled with iron determination. "Get up and finish this." The Marines rallied around him, drawn by his unshakable resolve. They had seen him go beyond what any of them thought possible. They had seen him endure pain, fear, and bloodshed. Now, they were ready to follow him to the ends of the galaxy, if necessary. The final push came. The enemy, though broken and disorganized, fought fiercely to protect their command center. The corridors inside were a maze of heavily fortified positions. The team moved cautiously, their nerves on edge as they encountered pockets of resistance. But Reese was already moving, his eyes scanning the battlefield, calculating every step. He was a man possessed his focus absolute. At one point, they encountered a choke point, a narrow corridor heavily guarded by enemy soldiers. The Marines hesitated. They knew that charging in would be suicide. But Reese didn't hesitate. He moved forward without a second thought, his weapon raised, his body an unyielding force of nature. "I'll draw their fire," he said, his voice steady despite the strain. "When I move, you flank and eliminate the enemy." One of the alien Marines spoke up, his voice laced with concern. "Captain, you can't keep this up. Let us handle it from here." Reese's gaze never wavered. "I'm not here to argue," he said with quiet authority. "We're here to win. So do your part, and I'll do mine." Before anyone could say more, Reese was already in motion. The enemy, predictably, turned their weapons on him. Shots rang out, ricocheting off the walls and hitting his armor. But Reese didn't flinch. His movements were precise, calculated. He took cover, then sprang forward again, making every shot count, drawing the fire of the defenders to give his team the chance they needed. The Marines followed his lead, flanking and wiping out the enemy in a swift, coordinated attack. With the enemy eliminated, Reese, though battered and bleeding, was the first to move forward, never pausing, never faltering. The Marines behind him followed closely, their confidence renewed by his example. Reese's will have become their strength. Inside the command center, the final battle awaited. It was fierce, brutal. But Reese kept moving, his rifle finding its mark, his body screaming for rest, but refusing to stop. His leadership, his resilience, became the rallying cry of the team. In the end, they triumphed. The command center fell, and the enemy was defeated. The Marines stood around Reese, looking at the man who had led them to victory. His body was broken, but his spirit was unyielding. As the dust settled, one of the Marines turned to him and asked, "Captain, how are you still standing?" Reese gave a faint smile, exhaustion evident on his face. "Standing's the easy part," he said with a dry chuckle. "Now we make sure this win counts." The team, their skepticism replaced with respect, began the process of securing the stronghold. The tale of Reese's actions spread quickly, becoming a legend among the Allied forces. His name became synonymous with human resilience. For Reese, however, it wasn't about glory. It was about doing what had to be done, no matter the cost. And as the Marines prepared to leave the stronghold, one of them spoke, still in awe. "You're not like anything we've ever seen, Captain." Reese, sitting now and finally allowing himself a moment of rest, chuckled softly. "We're not supposed to be," he said. "That's why we're here.